Good day, one and all. There's intro. A gentle reminder to all the participants, kindly mute your audio and video for better clarity. Thank you. Let's begin. As we pass through these unprecedented times, doubts galore fill our minds with fears and trepidation. Educators all over the world are empowering their students through social media, keeping up their spirits with dissemination of knowledge and counseling. As business and enterprises all over the world shut down one by one, the business of education surges ahead. Change is an inevitable part of life. Resistance to change is even more so. And as our educators strive to adapt to the changing rules of the world, constructive discussion is the need of the hour. More than 3 decades have passed since the previous National Education Policy in 1986. During this period, significant changes have taken place in our country, society, economy, and the world at large. Thus, NEP 2020 will be a greatly overlooked one, which would be going to revolutionize the whole educational sector. Thus, it has great importance in the present scenario. Towards this end, let's participate in this webinar. Good afternoon and warm greetings to all. Welcome to the webinar conducted by second year postgraduate students of Analytical Economics of the Government College for Women, Vazhuthcaud, Thiruvananthapuram, University of Kerala. We, Edwina, Lakshmi and Alina, second year postgraduate students of the Analytical Economics, will be moderating the session. Our department is extremely delighted to have the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the Mahatma Gandhi University, Dr. Sabu Thomas, who is without doubt one of the most eminent faculty members to speak on the National Education Policy 2020. Sir, we are honored to have you here with us today. Once again, a hearty welcome to our distinguished guest and the participants. Here are a few rules for the kind attention of the participants. If you have any queries, you can post it on the chat box. All the participants are requested to mute their microphones. The feedback form will be provided to the participants after the session tomorrow at 3:15 p.m. That is on the 23rd of August. Thank you for your cooperation. Let's start the program with a prayer.
എൻ മനസ്സിൽ കുടിയിരിക്കണമേ എന്റെ പാദം ഇടറാതിരിക്കുവാൻ എന്നും എന്നിൽ ദയാ ചൊരിയണമേ പൂവിലൂറുന്ന പുഞ്ചിരി നീയല്ലോ പുസ്തകം തരും ജ്ഞാനവും നീയല്ലോ പുല്ലുമാടവും പൂവണി മേടയും തുല്യമായി തരും ശക്തിയും നീയല്ലോ നല്ല ബുദ്ധിയായി എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിലും നല്ല ഭാഷയായി നാവിൻ്റെ തുമ്പിലും നല്ല ചെയ്തിയായി എൻ പിഞ്ചു കയ്യിലും നന്മയായി നീ കുടിയിരിക്കണമേ.
Dr. Uma Jodi, Head of the Department of Economics, as guiding light for the students and the department. She always runs from pillar to post to make all the events of the department a grand success. I invite Uma ma'am for the welcome speech.
Thank you. Honorable Vice Chancellor of the Mahatma Gandhi University, Dr. Sabu Thomas, respected Principal, Dr. Aravind Krishnan, distinguished participants of this webinar, dear colleagues and children. The Postgraduate Department of Economics and Research Center is happy, as always, to be driven once again by an initiative of our co-learners, I mean our students. In this pandemic age, marked by sudden shifts in the dynamics of learning environment and behavior, we have been trying to be connected through some humble academic engagements. We have 2 PG courses and 1 UG course in our department. Students in each class and our research scholars have been coordinating webinars, competitions, and group discussions, keeping the roads clear for teachers. Here is one more page in the volume of teamwork. The webinar on National Education Policy 2020, coordinated by students of second MA Economics, is yet another edition. Appreciating the students for their dedicated efforts, let me move to my pleasant duty. The theme of this webinar is National Education Policy 2020, which aims at making India a global superpower of knowledge. This is the third, as Edwina said, this is the third in the partially disconnected series of our education policies. We had two policy outputs, one in 1968 and the second in 1986. And the 2020 policy chapter covers elementary education to higher education and research. Of course, there are several promises with unique vision and comprehensible ambitions. It has evoked mixed reactions and responses, and that is, of course, the usual course of any policy document, especially one like this, with the deep and long-lasting impact. Radical structural transformation, choice-based and horizontal system, substituting the previously existing linear forms, the flexi possibilities, including multiple entry and exit points, the choice in medium of instruction, new evaluation modes, alignment of higher education to the global system, and the claims on forward-looking vision for molding a generation which would be fully capable to propel India's engines of development. And of course, the development of basic cognitive skills, higher order cognitive skills, and social and emotional skills, and so on. So these and many more are among the promises in this policy document, National Education Policy 2020. And on an optimistic note, we may agree that this would make our education more experiential, holistic, equitable, learner-centered. These are all the claims. Flexible, enjoyable, and with ethical basis for character building and scientific basis for ability and enrichment. But on the other side, there are grounds for skepticism too, especially in the highly fragmented higher education scenario, which has been in search of practices which match the promises and policy prescriptions. So what does this policy framework offer? Are we in the right direction? This webinar seeks to probe the truths with able assistance of resource persons like our Honorable Vice Chancellor, and of course with self-reflections, individual and collective. We are indeed blessed by the presence of one of the most eligible academics, Dr. Sabu Thomas, a scientist par excellence, dedicated teacher, true mentor, prolific writer, thinker, visionary administrator, innovative learner. Dr. Sabu Thomas, we really adore you, sir, not only for your academic records, but also for the sincere work behind this and for your reformative plans for improving the quality of higher education, especially research. In fact, the plan submitted by sir and his team for reforming our higher education system is commendable, and that itself is thought-provoking. And of course, we all know about your busy schedules 24/7, but you kindly accepted the invitation of the coordinating team, our students, certainly understanding the core learner mode of coordination in this webinar. So with immense gratitude, let me welcome Dr. Sabu Thomas to this webinar on behalf of Government College for Women and also on behalf of the Department of Economics and all participants of this webinar. Welcome, sir. Our principal, Dr. Aravind Krishnan, has always been motivating us to do more. Thanking him for his full support, let me welcome our beloved principal. I think he has not joined. He will join us. So welcome to Aravind sir also. Hearty welcome to all the distinguished participants of this webinar. Wish you all a very fruitful session today and also tomorrow. Thank you.
In the absence of our principal, Dr. Arvind Krishnan K., we are moving to the inaugural and keynote address. We are privileged to have Professor Dr. Sabu Thomas, who is presently the Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University. He has 22 years of teaching excellence, and he is a Fellow of Royal Society of Chemistry, London, Fulbright Fellow, USA, and Professor at University of Lorraine, Nancy, France. His corpus index is 89, His total number of publications is 1,000 and also have 15 patents. He is cited in the list of most productive researchers in India with a position of 5. Also, he is listed in the most cited researcher in material science and engineering by Elsevier Scopus Beta 2016. He was awarded with Best Faculty Research Award in 2018. Professor Dr. Sabu Thomas took his PhD in polymer blends from Catholic University, Leuven, Belgium, Macromol Science and Engineering Research Center, Laval University, Quebec, Canada, and from IIT Kharagpur. He is also a visiting professor in many universities around the world. This is just a short list of his excellence. We are so much honored to have you here as a resource person. I invite Professor Dr. Sabu Thomas for the inaugural and keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Very good evening to all of you. I'm extremely delighted for interacting with you today. Thanks for the kind invitation. And the principal of the college, Department of Economics, the head of the Department of Economics, faculty members, Yabina, who actually interacted with me for inviting me. Lakshmi, actually, she introduced me, the audience, all the students. I'm glad that you are organizing a sort of web discussion on National Education Policy 2020. I congratulate the economics department to introduce such a topic and to have a very good discussion meeting. And I'm glad that this discussion meeting will give rise to a lot of further discussions and deliberations on the subject. We all know that national education policy approved by the parliament involved lots of discussion in the country now. And the purpose of the national education policy is to transform the lives of millions of Indians. I am extremely happy to share some of my knowledge, some of my understanding on the subject. Then we can have some sort of discussion. I am from Mahatma Gandhi University, now the Vice Chancellor of the university. And those who are really interested to see my work, you can look into my website, sabuthomas.com and iiucnn.mgu.ac.in. I'm going to the first slide. Can you see this slide? The evolution of education policy. Can you all see my slide?
Yes, sir, we can
Yes,
see.
sir.
Yes, I'm going to tell you the dynamics of the education policy in the country after independence. Immediately after independence, we introduced Universal Education Commission, that is 48-49. I'm sure all the economic students should know about it. The University Education Commission was introduced 48-49. This was followed by Secondary Education Commission, 1952-53. In 1964-66, we have the famous Dr. D.S. Kothari Commission report. This is called Education Commission report. Very famous report. And 1968, we have the National National Policy in Education. It's called NPE. And in 1976, there was a big constitutional amendment. This is called 42nd Constitutional Amendment, bringing education under concurrent list. There's a lot of discussion now. Government is deviating from this policy because critics say government is sort of centralizing education policy, deviating from the concurrent list. The 42nd Constitutional Amendment made in 1976. Under Rajiv Gandhi in 1986, we have the National Policy in Education called NPE. If you further look into the evolution process, you can see NPE 1986 modified in 1992. Basically, to introduce a program of action. Then we had to wait till 2016 to have the TSR Subramanian Committee report on 27 May 2016. Now we have the Kasturirangan Committee report approved by the Parliament on 31st May 2019. So I hope you all understand the dynamics of the evolution process. If you look at the vision of the national education policy, the main vision of the national education policy is to impart high quality education to all. So my first slide, I'm sure all of you must have seen it, the National Education Policy 2020, the major transformational reforms in education. The idea of national education policy is to transform the lives of millions of Indians, to transform them into global citizens. That is the main agenda of National Education Policy 2020. I spoke about the evolution of education policy. Can you all see this slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. I have explained the dynamics of the education policy. Started immediately after independence, our Universal Education Commission, then Secondary Education Commission, 52-53, the famous Kothari Commission report, 64-66, National Education Policy in 1968, and in 1976 we brought the education concurrent list, National Education Policy of our former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, modified National Policy of Education in 1992. Then came 2016, the TSR Subramanian Committee report. So the real discussion started. And now the Kasturirangan Committee report has been approved by the Parliament. So we are discussing the 2019 report of Kasturirangan. This is to give you an understanding about the overall evolution of the education policy in the country immediately after independence and what is the present status. Yes. So this slide indicates the vision of the national education policy. If you look at this slide very carefully, you all will understand that the main vision of the national education policy is high quality education to all the people, taking care of equity and inclusiveness. I'm sure the economic students are familiar with equity, inclusiveness. You need to have inclusive education, education to all the people, irrespective of your economic background, irrespective of your language, irrespective of your religion. So we have to serve equity and inclusiveness. The second vision of the education policy is develop deep sense of respect towards fundamental right of a person, fundamental duties, and respect the constitutional values. That is a second vision document of the education policy. And the third vision document of the education policy is skill development, massive skill development. Transform the Indian population into a knowledge-based society. Sustainable development, holistic development, and transform us into global citizens. So these are the three major visions of the Education Policy 2020. Yes. You all will see a slide, the key principles of national education policy. The first one is diversity. Respect for diversity. That's extremely important. See, my campus, I wanted to make it diverse. I wanted to have students from all parts of the country. I wanted to have students from abroad. So we wanted to have a diverse culture in the campus. That's very important. Respect diversity. But at the same time, you have to give local context, local materials, local studies, local literature. So that's very important. So the first principal key point of education policy, diversity, keeping up the local context. We have to preserve the local context. The second principle of the NEP is equity and inclusiveness, the cornerstone of all education institutions. We have to be equal. We have to have inclusive education, include everyone in the education process. And the third point is the participation. Who are participating? The community participation. Community has to be involved in this program. Private participation. Participation of the philanthropist. A lot of philanthropists, they are ready to help our education system. Look at Tata. Tata support our education system quite a lot. Indian Institute of Science was actually started by Tata. Tata Institute of Social Science, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. Tata has played a big role for the country. So we need to have philanthropic participation. We also need to have community participation. That is the second key principle of NEP. And the third principle of NEP is massive use of technology. Technology for teaching, technology for learning process, technology for evaluation process, technology for removing the barriers of language. You have a language barrier. So wherever it's possible, you use technology. And the next important point, probably that's a very important point, conceptual understanding. What now students do is they just mug and write the examination. That has to be stopped. You have to understand the subject. Conceptual understanding is extremely important. Emphasize conceptual understanding. Now, many students just learn for exam. That has to be stopped completely. And we need to have good evaluation system to do that. And we also have to develop capabilities, lots of capabilities for the students, lots of skill development. Another important principle of NEP is develop intellectual thinking process, creativity, very important. And we also need to have a continuous evaluation process, whether we are able to achieve this. That's the meaning of continuous review process. These are the essential principles of national education policy. I think this is pretty good. You all might see this slide, universal access to early childhood care and education. Short form is ECCE. You see lots of footprint. You know what the government is trying to do? Government is trying to introduce excellent foundation learning curriculum. If you look at the foundation learning curriculum, you have to start education at the age of 3. You put your child in the Anganwadi. 4, 5, 6, 3 years of Anganwadi training. One of the main criticism is, Anganwadis are not well equipped in the country. Anganwadis do not have good teachers. So we need to have Montessori trained excellent teachers for the Anganwadi. That has to be taken into account, otherwise it will be a total failure. So the new education policy, if you critically analyze, the kids are sent to Anganwadi or preschool for 3 years, at the age of 3. Then what they will do? They will go to class 1 and class 2. That's the meaning of the so-called 3 plus 2, 5 years. And you might think, how do you do that? In these 5 years of time, they have to do activity-based learning, the so-called play and learn. Inquiry-based learning, that is fantastic. If you can achieve this, it's fantastic. Many countries follow this pattern. Up to grade 2, 3 years of Anganwadi, then class 1 and class 2, they should not be forced to study anything. They should play and study. That is extremely important. You know how government is planning to do this or going to implement this as joint operation of Ministry of HRD, Women and Child Development, WCD, Health and Family Welfare, and Tribal Affairs. So 4 entities are joining together to take care of universal access to early childhood care and education. This is extremely important. If you can do it in an excellent way, this is fantastic. But we need to invest quite a lot to transform our preschool Anganwadi. It should be state of the art. Excellent teachers, excellent infrastructure. And if you look at this slide, you will see multifaceted, flexible learning process. Now, if you look at the present education process, the kids go to kindergarten and they're forced to learn a lot of things. If you do that, the intrinsic capability of the child is lost. That's the situation we are facing now in the country. Many people criticize the early age education in India because the children are really forced to learn a lot. On the other hand, in the present education policy, the whole activity is based on playing. How do you ensure this? That's a very important point. How do you ensure this? There are a lot of things to be done. We need to build lots of schools. How do you do that? You need to have participation from non-governmental organizations, philanthropic organizations. There should be massive investment to have state-of-the-art facilities to ensure universal access to education to all levels. You know, there are a lot of dropout in school. Crores of 1 or 2 crores of children actually drop out. Official statistics say 1 crore, but the real statistics is probably the real understanding is much more than this. So bring back the dropout. It's a good point. Multiple pathways, peer tutoring, learning outcomes. So you can see there are lots of components involved in this in order to ensure universal access to education at all levels. Yes. So what are the expected outcome of this? Early childhood care and education. Yes, universal access to all the children to education. That's a very important point. You can ensure equity and inclusion. Very good. Dropouts could be brought back to the school. See, look at 2 crores of students actually drop out from the school. Bring them back. Attain SDG goals. Very important point. Improve quality and achievement in learning outcome. And attain 21st century skills, teaching, learning, and assessment. You are able to share the resources in the school complexes. Overcoming the language barrier in learning process. And common standards for the public and private school education. See, now there are lots of differences. The public school education and private school education, that has to be stopped. So common standards for both. Common standards for both. Common standards for public and private schools. I have a beautiful slide here. Thanks to my PhD scholar, he made this slide. You look at the present scenario of our schooling, that is 10+2 schooling. The bottom part, you can see the preschool, the kindergarten. But basically, we say the 10+2 school, 10 years of, 10 years of schooling, and then you have the +2. But look at the new academic structure. Foundational program, preparatory program, foundational program is for 5 years. Preparatory program is for 3 years. Middle school is for 3 years. and secondary school is 4 years. So this is a system now. 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. Let me again explain what we do in the foundational level, multi-level play-centered learning process, activity-based learning process. Kids should not be forced to learn. They should play and learn. That is the foundational force, where we need excellent teachers. I would say we need Montessori trained brilliant teachers for this. Look at the preparatory stage. That is class 3 to 5, preparatory stage. There also we don't force them to learn. There also you play and discover, again, activity-based learning, interactive learning, classroom learning. Then they will go to the middle stage. It's called middle school, 3 years, class 6, 7, and 8, where they learn science, mathematics, arts, social science, and humanities. There is no difference. They learn everything. Science, mathematics, arts, social science, and humanities. That is the middle school. Look at the secondary stage 4. That is multidisciplinary approach, where you have to really inculcate critical thinking. Again, you have the flexibility component is there, but the students can choose their subject. They can choose the science subject, they can choose the art subject, they can choose the commerce subject. So this is a new pedagogical approach, the so-called 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. You can see a beautiful cartoon here. This is to indicate the early childhood education, especially learning and formative years. This is very critical for a child is concerned. If you look at this slide, you can see during this time, development of curiosity, logical thinking and problem solving. The kids listen to music, arts and craft. They look at the nature, understand the nature. They play with colors, shapes, alphabets and numbers. Fantastic things are being done by the kids. They play with their friends and they make team. So they know, they learn how to make teams and how to collaborate. A play-based discovery and play-based learning process. They understand the ethics. They understand the self-identity and the lot of emotional development. So this early childhood is extremely important. That is why I always say here we need brilliant teachers, trained teachers. Now I'm going to sum up the major reforms in school education. If you sum up what I spoke now, the first one is universalization of early childhood care. You give this to everyone. It's a universal, ECCE. 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, the curricular and pedagogical structure. And a lot of skills, mathematical thinking, scientific temper to be inculcated. No rigid separation between arts, science, between curricular and extracurricular activities. Vocational program is embedded. You see, I'll tell you my experience. I cooperate with many people abroad. My good collaborator, Professor Gabriel Grunings, he's now retired. And he's able to do all the activities. He's a chemist, but he's a good plumber. He's a good electrician. You know, I asked Professor Grunings, how did you learn all these things? He said he learned everything in school. So this new education policy, the vocationalization, the skills are being sort of embedded in the education program in school. That's extremely important. Gender inclusion fund is very interesting. Vocational integration from class 6 onwards. So there are lots of interesting reforms in the school education. This is actually a very interesting slide. Attainment of literacy and numeracy. When the kids reaches grade 3, they should be able to count, they should be able to read well. They should have all the foundational skills. They should be able to utilize the library. They should be able to understand the various subjects. And this slide shows the foundational attainment of the skill of literacy and numeracy. Let me now go to higher education. Higher education means after +2. If you look at the present scenario, you all might be aware of the term called GER, gross enrollment ratio. The gross enrollment ratio in higher education in India is something like 26%. Kerala is very close to 37-36%. In Tamil Nadu, it is 43%. So government has an ambitious program of increasing the gross enrollment ratio. That means lots of youngsters should be able to go to university. We wanted to raise to 50%. If you look at United States, it's very close to 95-96%. So very high gross enrollment ratio. Japan is very high. European countries very high enrollment ratio. China is ahead of us. So this is a very interesting, reform. Attain 50%. Right now, the Indian average value of GR is statistically average value is 25%. You make a jump, quick jump. 4 years of UG program. If you look at our present UG program, they're all 3 years. If you look at the science program, they're all 3 years except engineering. There's not much of research involved in this. I happen to supervise many students when I went for postdoc and visiting assignment. I used to work with the UG students. The last year, the 4th year, they are doing excellent research work. I remember once when I went to US as a speaker for the SES meeting, I evaluated a large number of undergraduate projects, posters. And many undergraduate students, they have really very good publication. So it's very important that we need to stop the 3 years of bachelor's program. We have to transform it to 4 years and 1 year of master. And we also should start the integrated program. 5 years of integrated program. My campus, MGU campus, we are going to start 5 years of BSc, MSc, 5 years of BA, MA. We are starting in this academic year. And this is a very nice idea to discontinue MPhil. MPhil, the students are not doing any serious work. I always recommend instead of MPhil, the students should go for a PhD directly. Credit transfer is very interesting. If a student in MGU can do an MA in economics, doing an MA in economics can take a few, credits from London School of Economics and you can transfer the credit. That's very interesting. Academic bank of credits. Multidisciplinary approach. So these are some of the salient features of higher education scenario in the new education policy. Graded autonomy. You give autonomous status to a large number of colleges in the country. Right now we have something like 40,000 colleges in the country. And the government is planning to give graded autonomy over a period of time, maybe 15 years. They say they are going to stop the affiliation system. But this has to be done very carefully. Because I know lots of colleges in the country, they are for very poor standard. So if you convert all these colleges over a period of 15 years into sort of autonomous colleges or universities, it will be very disastrous. It will lead to anarchy. So the government has to be extremely careful giving autonomy to colleges. I would say this is something based on NAR of ranking. If a college is a very high NAR of ranking, if a college is A++ in NAC grading, probably we can think of giving autonomy. National mission and mentoring, that's a very good program. Independent board of governors, like in IIT has board of governors. Single regulator for higher education, that's a very nice idea. Now we have UGC, AICT, so many organizations in the country. Bring them all together in one regulatory agency in the country. That will be fantastic, except legal and medicine. Online self-disclosure based transparent system of approval. That's also fantastic. Common norms for public and private education scenario. Philanthropic partnership. That's a very nice idea. A lot of people in the country, they are able to contribute for education. Public investments, increase the public investment to 6% of GDP. That's a very interesting point. Right now, we are spending something like 3 or 4%, 3% or 4%. If it is increased to 6%, it will be extremely good for the education. I wanted to tell you, this is also quite interesting. National formation of National Research Foundation. This is something like South Africa. South Africa has NRF. I cooperate with South Africa a lot. I evaluate large number of programs of NRF South Africa. So form a national research foundation to take care of all research in the country. Now we have DST, we have CSIR, we have so many umbrella organizations. So bring one national research foundation like NSF in US. It's a good idea. Internationalization of education, that has to be taken, that has to be implemented very, very carefully. Because if you bring in large number of foreign universities in India, then there will be a lot of competition between these foreign universities and our public universities. Our public universities are not well funded. So this has to be carefully introduced. Internationalization of education has to be done. Of course, this will give you a lot of competition. But this has to be done very, very carefully. Integration of vocational, teacher and professional education, a good idea. Setting up of new quality in higher education institute has been made easier. We have to stop all standalone institutions in the country. Now we have many universities. University for Sanskrit, University for Malayalam, University for law, University for medicine, University for engineering. So standalone higher education institutions and professional institutions will evolve into multidisciplinary. That's a very important point. The university should have all disciplines in the campus. Medicine, engineering, humanities, science, arts, everything together. The university has to be multidisciplinary. That's a very good idea. Special education zone for disadvantaged regions of the country. For example, northeastern region, we need to give importance. National Institute for Pali, Persian and Prakrit languages. And MHRD is going to be renamed as Ministry of Education. These are the major reforms in higher education. Now, I wanted to tell you how much of money we spend for research in the next slide to give you some understanding about the research contribution. You see, I put a question here. Why can't we find the next Raman? Why can't we find the next Nobel Prize? You know, if you look at the amount of spending for R&D in the country, I made a statistical analysis, the world scenario. United States spend 2.8% of GDP for research. Just behind United States, look at China. People say China will overtake within a few years United States in terms of spending in research, 1.9. Look at India spending 0.88% of GDP. And I hope that since government is planning 6% of GDP for education, I hope there is a substantial increase for research and development. Otherwise, the country will not develop. So I hope this government will put a lot of money for research and development. I wanted to show you current scenario in the case of patents. If you look at the number of patents filed per million population, South Korea is the topper in the world. 4,451 patents for 1 million population. Followed by Japan, followed by Germany, United States. Look at India, 17 patents per 1 million population. This we have to increase. Remarkably, I'm sure the country is making good progress, but we need to spend a lot of money. We need to attract brilliant people to research. Look at the scientific researchers in the country. This is again a very global analysis. India has just only 4 scientific researchers for every 10,000 people. Very low. China, 18 researchers per 10,000 people. UK and US are the toppers, 79 and 79. So we need to train large number of people. We need to attract good number of people into research. How can we do that? Putting a lot of money. Increase the number of fellowships. Another index of quality of research is the number of publications. Number of publications, if you look at United States, the topper, 450,000 publications. China, I'm sure people say China will overtake United States very soon for 325,000 publications. Look at India, 90,000 publications. If you look at our population, our publication should be as good as in China. If you look at 1995, 1970, 80, in research, India was ahead of China. But after 1990, we went down. So we need to put lots of money for research. Otherwise, the country cannot make progress. I wanted to quote Professor Sena Rao. Professor Rao said, I'm not worried about the quantity as much as the quality of science coming from India. It is also not showing any improvements. According to Professor Rao, India still contributes less than 1% of world's top 1% of research. You can understand that word. India contributes less than 1% of world's top 1% of research. And Professor Rao further continued. He said, there are few individuals in various places who are doing well, but this is not enough. We need many institutions doing outstanding work in the country that can accommodate our young, brilliant people. There's a lot of interest in this education policy, a lot of importance to languages. If you look at the school education, they say the school education should be more in the local language, the mother tongue. So therefore, a lot of focus on literature, scientific vocabulary of Indian languages. Language faculty has to be trained. Research on languages, strengthening national languages, promotion of classical languages in literature, cultural awareness of our Indian knowledge system. This is quite interesting. Giving lots of importance to local languages, local culture, local values. Another important point in this education policy is massive use of technology. Technology for planning, technology for teaching, technology for learning, technology for assessments, technology for administration, technology for management. That is very interesting. Virtual laboratories. Students should see the virtual laboratories first and then they do the real experiments. I can share an experience. When I went to the United States as a Fulbright fellow, I went to George Washington University in the capital of the country, in Washington, D.C. We went to the medical department. We interacted with the nursing students and medical students. All the nursing students, you know what they do? They do first theory, modeling, and simulation. We were seeing actually a simulation of a delivery. They see how the delivery is taking place in a simulated manner, and then they go to the real experiment. So we have to give lots of importance to virtual laboratories. Government is planning National Education Technology Forum, digitally equipping schools, teachers, and students. I'm going to summarize what I talked so far. If you look at critically what are the important outcomes of NEP 2020, I would say the first important point is universalization of early childhood education. Aligning with sustainable development goals. What are the sustainable development goals? Equity, inclusiveness, promotion of lifelong learning process. Attaining foundational learning and numeracy and skills through National Mission 2025. എല്ലാവരെയും വായിക്കാനും എഴുതാനും പഠിപ്പിക്കുക. 100% gross enrollment ratio in preschool and secondary school. That's a fantastic idea. And 50% gross enrollment ratio in higher education sector by 2035. And bring back our 2 crores of our children to drop out, bring them back to school. Fantastic idea. Teachers to be prepared for assessment reforms by 2023. Inclusive and equitable education system. So these are some of the important features of NEP 2020. Let me also mention some of the critical merit points. I would say a few merits. If you look at this education policy, understanding of the core concepts. There's a DVC. Many children, what they do now, they just mark and study for examination. That has to be stopped. Understanding of core concepts and application of knowledge. National Research Foundation is a very interesting process, the starting of NRF. And spending 6% of GDP for education, something very interesting. And we have to really increase the spending for research. Overall quality improvement in colleges, schools, and universities. Embedded vocational training in schools. You have to teach the children multiple skills. And finally, transform the population into global citizens to take up the new challenges. These are the important merits of NEP. Now let us look at what are the issues and problems. You see, the role of the state is not recognized well. There's sort of deviation from the concurrent list approach. So that's really a problem. The state has to be given due importance. And if you look at this education policy, there's a lot of centralized approach. That will not help. And importance of National Council for Education and Research Training, NCERT. Then I have a question. What the State Council will do? See, Kerala government has a State Council for Education, Research and Training. What they will do? Local bodies participation. See, if you look at, they talk about community, but local body participation, panchayat participation, the panchayat is extremely important. That is lacking in this policy. The quality of Anganwadis have to be improved. Otherwise, very disastrous. We have to have brilliant teachers in the Anganwadis, the whole country, because that is a formation stage of a kid. And I also want to tell you that creation of large number of autonomous colleges and deemed to be universities will be disastrous for the country. Never do that. It has to be done very, very carefully. Colleges which are excelling with A++ and high NIR of ranking could be considered for autonomy and deemed status to be universities. Overall, when you look at this document, lack of pragmatic approach, implementation, there is no implementation strategy. That is lacking. So I would say it's not very realistic. So these are the issues of the education policy. So I thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really a wonderful session. Now, let's move on to the interactive session. Participants, those who wish to ask questions can write your name in the chat box. As this is an interactive session, you can directly ask question to sir. Others, please keep your audio muted in the meantime. So, now let's start. Those who wish to ask questions can write your name in the chat box. Okay, Chinju, you can unmute yourself now.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Whether the granting of autonomy will result in the increase of cost of education? I afraid that students from economically weaker section will be badly affected. Is there a chance to change from student-oriented education to institution-oriented education?
You know, my suggestion is, in the policy, if you look at equity, inclusiveness, you know, that is the foundational principles of this policy. And I believe that government will come out with massive support for economically backward students. That is extremely important. Otherwise, we cannot justify the fundamental principles of equity and inclusiveness. Meritorious students should be supported. Those who are economically poor students should be supported. And a large number of universities, that is not a good idea. NARF ranking, national, NAC ranking, if they're doing extremely well, then we can think of giving them autonomy. There is no point in giving autonomy to all the colleges. That is disastrous or dangerous. And I don't want, if you look at United States, I have visited many colleges in the United States. They're autonomous. They give their own degree. But in front of, when you go into the college, you will see a board. Not profit for the organization, not profit organization. They say our college is not standing for profit. That could be the motto of every private institution. They should not make it an institution of profit. And whatever money they gain, they should invest in the institution. Then they can excel. Otherwise, they will perish eventually. That is my message.
Thank you, Chinju. Adarsh, you can unmute your audio now.
Good afternoon, sir. My question is with respect to Kerala. In Kerala, we can see that the educated unemployment is on the rise, and one of the major problems that we face is educated unemployment. So, will this new educational policy address this issue? Mainly, many say that this educated unemployment is due to lack of technical skill or lack of skill-oriented education. So, will this new educational policy address this issue?
You see, if you look at this, if you look at the school education, there's a lot of skill development in the school. A lot of skill development in the school program. The vocational program is embedded in the school program. Therefore, we will be able to get students with lots of skills. And our ITIs and polytechnics are going to be state of the art. You must have seen that all the ITIs and polytechnics have been have been made state of the art. I'm sure that if you do that, you will get a lot of jobs. Automotive industry is growing well. So many sectors we are making good progress. So if you make intelligence programs, definitely you can get good jobs. If you have vocational program very embedded in the school syllabi, then you can really skill them quite efficiently. And if you look at the new education policy, more importance is given to understanding the concept, not really mugging and writing the examination. If you are coming to this status, understanding the concept, and you also have to do a lot of experimentation, if you can do that, you can develop lots of skilled people. And that will probably serve the industry. Now industry has a complaint, whatever engineers they get from the universities, colleges, they are not real engineers. They are not trained. So in the new education policy, we are giving lots of importance for training the students during their course. They will be sent to industries, they will be trained them well. And if you have such an education system, that will be fantastic. I can share an example. I went to United States. I went to a university called Drexel in Philadelphia. Drexel engineering is 5 years. And 1 year is internship. And they sent the students to internship program in major companies in the US. After 1 year of internship, these students are absorbed in their company. Therefore, Drexel 5 years of bachelor's degree is gaining a lot of momentum in the US. Lots of young students want to join Drexel University because this internship is embedded in the program. So if you can develop such education schemes where you have a lot of internship and training program, then you can develop really skilled students. And they will find easy employment. This is my answer.
Okay, thank you, sir. Tom, you can unmute your audio now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you very much Thank you very much for your very insightful and informative presentation about this policy. So as I read through the entire policy of 66 pages, I understand that it's very comprehensive and well-written policy, and it is written as very aspirational one and sounds like very promising. For example, I noticed special mention about 4 terms, and those words they repeatedly used in such as holistic, equity, equitable, inclusive. They are very powerful and meaningful, promising words. So as you mentioned, there are so many new fantastic ideas like reforms in early childhood care education, National Research Foundation, credit transfer idea, dropping MPhil. It's a fantastic idea. The researchers should go directly to the PhD. So the issue here is government should come out with a practical action plan. We don't see. It's a policy. So policy does not come up with an action plan.
Yeah.
But we don't, from our past experience so far, for example, we have, is it going to be a theoretical promise like Right to Education, RTE Act in 2009? So my question is it realistic and practically executable in a country like our country, in our stage, current stage?
You know, the problem with this education policy is there are no implementation strategies. This is just only a document, this is a policy. And governments really should introduce this, and they should make a strategic plan to implement this. That is lacking. Otherwise, this is just a policy. They have to really implement this in reality. There should be political will to do that. I hope this government will take some initiative. Taking care of the drawbacks I've indicated. There is no point in giving, starting large number of universities, giving independence to all the colleges. That will be disastrous. But government should actually plan a very good program of implementation. That is lacking. This is only a policy document. And we need real political will to implement this. And we see, look at 6% for education is something fantastic. You know how much we spend for research? 0.88% of GDP. If you have 3% or 2.5, 3%, that would be fantastic. So there should be a political will to do that. Your question is very interesting. Otherwise, this is simply a document. It does not have much.
Yeah, one of the apprehensions is how much the government found out the real gap between this strategy or planning or this document and the implementation. That's one of the apprehension.
You see, if you really want to implement this in an effective manner, there should be community participation. Participation of the state government is very important. Participation in philanthropies is very important. Participation of NGOs is very important. Participation of private companies is very important. So if you go to universities abroad, I'll tell you a story. If you go to France, you see 70% of funding in research is coming from industry in France. In the United States, look at leading universities, a lot of funding from philanthropists and companies. So there should be massive interaction between companies, philanthropists, state governments, central governments, NGOs, and local bodies. Then only we can really achieve this goal. You see, I went to University of Pennsylvania. The president of the University of Pennsylvania said, when they plan a new building, they have management experts and they will go around the world and bring money from philanthropists. So massive funding is obtained through philanthropism in US. There's a big component of philanthropic funding. We should bring a lot of money from philanthropy. This country has a lot of philanthropists. So if government has a will, I'm sure we will be able to do that. Corporate social responsibility funding. Now companies are not really interested, but you have to bring lots of, build up a lot of interaction between university and companies, industries, philanthropists. I think we will be able to do that if there is a will.
Yeah. So with your permission, one last point and one last question. one of my another apprehension is that this national education policy brings in a huge centralization effort along a single axis of control and power.
Yes.
And to me, it's paradoxical, because it's given the size of our country, the population of our country, diversity of our country, and even our constitutional federalism. You mentioned in your last slide, yes, if you consider constitutional federalism, this too much centralization effort which they are doing through this policy, it's not acceptable in a country like India.
Yes. This is a very important drawback of this policy, centralized approach. The state has to be given the due importance. Otherwise, it will be a total failure. If you want to implement something in Kerala, we need to have the full support of the government of Kerala. So participation of the state is extremely important. You cannot implement this in a centralized approach in a country like India, one of the biggest democracies in the world. So that attitude has to be changed. We have a state board for the schools, the centralized board. If you do everything in a centralized approach, it will be a big failure. That is what I mentioned in the last. You were not very realistic.
Yes.
The realistic approach is in cooperation with state government, in cooperation with the communities, in cooperation with the local bodies. Local bodies participation is not mentioned. There is a statement in communities, but we need to have active participation in local bodies. Then only this NEP will be successful. You have mentioned a very important point. Again, I agree with you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Tom. I think it's already past our scheduled time. We can wind up the session now. I appreciate each one of you for keeping the interaction lively. Now, I call upon Anu Noble to deliver a vote of thanks. Over to you, Anu.
The best and beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt by heart. Thank you is one such pair among them. A very good afternoon to one and all present here. Myself, Anu Noble, on behalf of the Department of Economics, Government College for Women, consider it a great privilege to propose the vote of thanks for the first session of National Webinar on National Education Policy 2020, organized by 2nd MA Analytical Economics. With God in our midst, all good things can be accomplished. Our wholehearted thanks to God Almighty for enabling us to organize such a wonderful webinar. On behalf of the Postgraduate Department of Economics and Research Center, I express my heartfelt thanks to our resource person, Professor Dr. Sabu Thomas, Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University, for taking his precious time out and consenting to be the resource person for today. Sir, indeed, your words have enlightened us. Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our principal, Dr. Aravind Krishnan, for his encouragement and support. Thank you, sir. I wish to express my love and gratitude to our HOD, Dr. Uma Jyoti, who is our backbone for her constant support and guidance, without whom this session would not have been possible. Also, I would like to thank you, our tutor, Dr. Sunija Begum, for being with us. I am happy to express my thanks to the faculty members and research scholars of our department. Last but foremost, I thank the wonderful participants who have turned up in such great numbers, not only from Kerala, rather from other states as well. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Once again, I thank all of your cordial cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best. Thank you, Edwina, for inviting me.
Tomorrow on 23rd of August, we will be having an open discussion on the topic, Impact of National Education Policy 2020 on Higher Education. The link will be provided to your email address, and you can join the WhatsApp group with the guidelines regarding the open discussion. Feedback form will be provided after tomorrow's open discussion. Once again, I extend my sincere gratitude to our eminent speaker, Dr. Sabit Mani, and the participants. I'm sorry for the inconvenience caused. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.